Welcome to Books on Air, the podcast that tells the story behind the book. It includes insights from authors about how they compose their work, what inspires them, and what they hope you'll take away from their book. Here's your host for this episode of Books on Air, Suzanne Harris.
Welcome to the Books on Air podcast. I'm Sloan Fremont, filling in for Suzanne Harris. This is the podcast where listeners get the secret story behind every book. Joining me today is Janus Black, author of the book Enter The Huntress, an exciting sci-fi adventure story looking at the challenges of a relationship between a cyborg and a human. Janus, welcome to the Books on Air podcast. I'm so happy you're here.
Oh, it's nice to be here.
Well, why don't we start out by telling the audience just a little bit about yourself and what led you to write your book, Enter The Huntress?
Yeah, well, I'm 80 years old. I just had my 80th birthday.
Oh, happy birthday.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm a martial artist.
Okay.
I still fight full contact on the mat.
Oh, wow.
I'm a second dan black belt in three martial arts.
Uh-huh.
In samurai sword fighting called Iato, and karate and aikido. And it's all combined. It's the techniques of the samurai warrior. So we fight with the sword and we fight barehanded without it, against the sword. So it's good fun.
Wow, yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah. My life, I've been a professional drummer. I've played all over the world. I played in Washington, Oregon, California, Mexico, Florida. I played in India, Africa, and the Isle of Wight, just off the English coast.
Oh, wow. You're a busy man.
Yeah. Of course, I'm retired now, but I have worked with people with learning disabilities for 10 years. I worked as a London bus conductor for 10 years. That was good fun. And I worked as a senior residential officer with children with emotional problems.
Okay.
14 to 18-year-olds. That was quite hairy,
I bet.
Yeah, could be. And I've been a musician. I played a bit of piano in public bars, I've done that, and I've done all sorts of things in my life.
Yeah, it sounds like you've led a very interesting life.
Well, yeah, I've been a plumber's mate. I've done all sorts of stuff,
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your book and what led you to write it.
Okay. Well, first of all, I just wanted to write a novel. One of my ambitions, and I've been very interested in sort of robots and cyborgs and things, and the way in which artificial limbs are being developed, and so on. There's some marvelous things being done with these things now. They're incredible, and the science is developing so fast. I'm interested in scientific stuff, and I have a friend who was in the Ministry of Defence, who was a scientist working on top secret military stuff, which I've used. Of course, he couldn't tell me what he was working on,
right.
but he could give me some hints, and he read my book and said that everything in there is feasible.
Wow.
So it looks at the techniques of things like nanotechnology and microelectrical mechanical systems and advanced stuff like that. And there's some amazing things that are going on at the moment. Oh, yeah.
And so that's so interesting that you took real life science fiction, maybe. I get it could be still, even though it's happening, it's still sort of considered, I think, science fiction mainstream wise. And you've taken that and you've incorporated that into your novel. Now, tell us a little bit about the scene where the story takes place and why you chose that setting.
Yeah. I chose this setting because I was interested to see some of the ethics about building a cyborg, about combining the human brain with the machine.
Right.
And the sort of ethical problems that could lead to. And for a long time, actually, it's taken me 10 years to write this book.
Oh, wow.
Because when I started it, I came across a problem. And I've made a machine that is almost impossible to defeat. It's invulnerable, But these things have to have a weakness. Superman has krypton, right. Batman has psychological problems. They all have to have some weakness.
Right.
And And so I thought, what weakness can I make? I've made this thing indestructible. So, and then 10 years, I put the book down, and about 10 years later, it suddenly came to me. The big problem is going to be loneliness of this thing, because it's cut off from the human contact, physical contact, that is. And so how does it get around? How do you get around this? Loneliness is going to be a big problem. This thing is shut away in a box, if you like, a human brain. So then I decided, we introduced a human colleague to work with her. And that will help with this. She'll have companionship. Mm. And also, then there's the weakness. The weakness is not in the machine, but in the colleague. The colleague has a brother. Yeah. The colleague has a brother who is a gambling addict, and that's where the weakness is. Oh. And that's where the enemy hit in order to try and gain control over the machine through the brother.
Yeah. The brother.
Yeah.
And so the story takes place in what country?
Yeah, it starts off before she gets blown up. She gets blown up by an IED in Afghanistan. We have a special force called the SRR, Special Reconnaissance Regiment, where women work very closely with the special forces in the front line because of their specialized knowledge in reconnaissance and using special reconnaissance techniques and so on. And they go in disguised as women in with the natives and this sort of thing. So she's working with the SAS, the Special Air Service, which you've heard of. And she gets blown up by an IED. And all that's really left of her is her brain. Oh. And so she agrees to take part in an experiment where her brain is installed into a reconnaissance machine. And the reconnaissance machine has many attributes. One of the things it can do is it can change shape. Basically, it's a car, but it can change shape into other things. This is possible. There are materials now that can bend and twist. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So she can change in, for example, most of the action takes place in Colombia. Uh-huh. And drug cartels involved, Russians, the Russians who are trying to gain control of the machine, and drug cartels who are employed to do this by the Russians. And there are Nazis, because in South America, there are still pockets of Nazis.
Okay.
Who still live by the Nazi code.
Okay.
And there's evidence that after they escaped from Germany, they went to Argentina. There's evidence that there were nuclear experiments taken. They were doing nuclear experiments in Argentina. There are examples of heavy water installations. Heavy water is used in nuclear physics.
Okay.
And so there's evidence that they were doing these activities. Basically, the Huntress is sent to Colombia ostensibly to gain the release of 2 hostages who are being held by the FARC. They're a rebel organization in Argentina. At the moment, the FARC are quiet because they've been given a place in the government. But that can very quickly change. And in my story, they've changed. They've gone back into action again, and they've captured this scientist and his daughter. So ostensibly they're going to get them, but there is a second. There's a hidden motive where they're actually going to find a meteorite that's been tracked down into the jungle, which has been discovered by some British geologists, mineralogists, who have discovered that it's got a thing called superconductive qualities. Superconductivity is a very interesting thing. At the moment, it can only be achieved at very low temperatures, 5 degrees Kelvin. I think slightly higher now. They're trying to get the temperature back to normal. If they can ever achieve that, then you've got very, very cheap electricity. And that can be used in military and all kinds of things. So they're going after that. And other people, the Nazis going after it as well for the same reason, because they want to get control of this thing.
Right.
So we have this these people getting involved with the Nazis, the drug cartels, the Russians, and so it's quite
All the
There's
exciting
quite a
elements
story.
of a science fiction
Yeah,
science fiction
there's
book.
quite a story there. There's quite a story there, and then
Yeah.
they find the meteorite is not actually a meteorite at all. It appears to be an alien artifact.
Oh, ooh, the aliens! I love when that gets
Yeah,
into.
and
I love
that
reading science fiction books. So
yeah, that actually leads into my second book that I'm writing, which is called the Huntress and the Warrior Child.
okay, so we won't get into that because we don't want to spoil
No,
one today. But who was your favorite character to write when you were writing your book?
oh, definitely the Captain Hunter,
Yeah,
the girl.
yeah, and so
Because
go ahead.
so another thing is I like female heroines. You know,
Oh, okay, yeah,
yeah, I like to see a fighting woman. You know,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
I've always great affection for them. See too many men. You know, what about the women? You know,
right.
she's a very gutsy woman. Yeah.
And it seems like what the details you're describing, and I don't know a lot about these kinds of things with really what's possible with science and some of the different things that you've talked about. How did you research this? I know you mentioned you had a friend, but how did you find out about this kind of technology?
A lot of it on Google and books, you know, and reading up a lot of stuff. I read a very interesting thing in the National Geographic magazine. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
The National Geographic, yeah. Where they're doing, it's not very nice. They were doing an experiment with a monkey, and the monkey was put into a box with its arms pinned to its side, and it was fed by a remote arm that was controlled by its brain. The monkey's mind was controlling the arm to feed itself.
Yeah.
And that did that across the Atlantic with the machine in one part, the monkey in one part, and the machine in the other. So the monkey was controlling via satellites the movement of the arm in England from America. Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So these things, you know, amazing stuff. Prosthetics and so on, man, fascinating.
Yes, definitely. And being able to incorporate that into your book and having those real elements of real possibilities, and then being able to bring that into a novel is amazing. I love the storyline. I love all the different elements that, like I said, make for an exciting book.
And of course, the thing is, the very interesting thing is that with prosthetics, they can now make a prosthetic hand that can feel. It has sensitivity. And in my book, the machine has sensitivity. The machine can feel and sense things, you know, yeah, and so it can feel the air around it.
As a human.
The temperature, yeah, and it can feel the ground under the tires, under the wheels, you know. And the very interesting thing about it is that the motive power of the thing, it has not got an engine. It can't have, because it's going to change shape and do different things. It changes the shape of a snake. In one part of it, it changes because it's maneuvering through the jungle, through trees. It changes into the shape of a giant anaconda.
Wow.
And frightens the life out of the colleague, because the colleague sees it for the first time. What, you know? He sees that Jane Hunter has changed into an anaconda. So the actual motive thing is very much like the way our muscles work, by expansion and contraction. And this is the same. This works on the same system, so that the molecules expand and contract. You know, so this provides the motive. So this thing can work in any particular form. It can move like a snake, or it can create wheels and move on wheels. It can do all sorts of things, you know. So yeah.
Oh wow.
And it's also has other capabilities. There is a material now that can be coated onto. They're experimenting with. It can be coated onto tanks and things that can deflect missiles.
Wow.
It actually ripples.
Yeah.
The coating ripples and it bounces it off. Yeah, it's in early stages of experimentation.
Wow.
Then there are materials that will twist and bend to electrical impulses. You can make this thing move, the material move around. Yeah. Very clever stuff.
During the process of writing your book, what surprised you the most?
What surprised me? I think the way it was developing, probably, because a lot of writers sit down and they write all the stuff out in rough. I don't do that. I just create straight from here, and the story develops in my head as I'm writing. I tend to do it that way. So I get surprised by myself sometimes.
By your own creativity.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And I think, what's she doing now?
Right. What would you say was the most difficult part to write about?
Probably the ethics of the ethical problems that she comes up against, and the scientists come up against.
Right.
Because at one point, one of the other problems they have is that they have to try and give her some kind of light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
That they did an experiment. They found that the subject got very depressed and eventually went mad.
Mm-hmm.
They are now working on DNA cloning, as you know.
Right.
They've done cloning. So they said to her that in a few years they may be able to clone a new body for her and put her mind back into the body. Yeah. And so they held that hope open for her as well. So, but then there are ethical problems surrounding that, what you do.
Yes, and I would think that that's a really interesting point about the ethical problems, because it's like with anything, something can be used for good as it can be used for bad. And when you think about the ethics of things such as cloning or using, robotic parts and all these things, it's something, when I've read these things or I've seen them, I'll think, oh, that sounds really good. That's a great idea. And then, you think about the ripple effect of that, of what it has down the line. Exactly. Where is that point where it goes from being good to not so good, right? That's a really interesting question.
Yes, that's right. And then the interesting thing is also that they developed her sort of a romantic relationship.
Yeah.
Because he falls for her personality.
Right.
And she can show projections of what she used to look like. She can show a holographic image of what she used to look like. She can show him what she used to look like. And she talks to him through this image, Mm-hmm. Yeah, so his relation to a person, but not a machine,
Yes.
And there's a lot of badinage goes on between them, and the interesting thing is also is that she is the senior officer. The cyborg is the senior officer of the two. She's a captain, he's a lieutenant.
So she's the boss, and he's
she's the boss. Yeah, she controls things, and he does what he's told most of the time.
Yeah, and so there's that element of I guess
humor.
Yeah.
A lot of badinage and humor, between the pair. She takes as we say in England, she takes the Michael out of him, the Mickey. She takes the Mickey out of him.
What does that mean? I'm not from England, so I don't know what that means.
No, but it's the same. Taking the Mickey out of somebody is to make fun of them. Yeah.
Okay, I see.
So sometimes we say taking the Michael or taking the Mickey. Yeah.
Okay.
And the other thing about it is, no disrespect at all to the Americans, but so much of the action stories you see are American, not so much British. And I wanted to write something British.
Yeah.
With a British hero,
Yeah.
A British girl, Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
and so,
tell us what you're most proud of about your book.
Sorry?
What are you most proud of about your book, or even about the writing process?
The fact that I've written it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, after 10 years, yes.
Yeah. I mean, so many people say that they would like to write a book and they never get to do it. They maybe write a few pages and then they abandon it,
Yes.
And I've actually finished a book. That's the thing.
Yes, and congratulations to you on that. Yes.
But even if people don't like it, I've written it, and
you told your story. You used your creativity and you told your story, and it sounds like you learned a lot along the way too, with with everything you researched.
And I'll tell you the other thing is also I did very well at English at school. I got 98% for my English grammar. What we had in the old days is the General Certificate of Education, the GCE, in England. And I got 98% I failed 2 points on handwriting.
Oh.
Yeah. So my, but of course that's at O level, ordinary level GCE, not at A level. Advanced level, advanced GCE is much harder. So it's not so particular. And I found that there were still things that I didn't know when I was writing the book. I was using grammar aids, a thing called Grammarly.
Okay. Yes. Uh-huh.
And that helps spot mistakes and things. Interesting though, Grammarly also makes mistakes.
Yeah. And that goes back to that's interesting though on that, because that goes back to what we were talking about with with AI or computers or whatever, right? Because they don't get you all the way there most of the time, right? Because there is still that human element that as a human we're used to having the interaction, or we're used to having what's considered societal norms, right? Which is an interesting perspective on all of this too.
It is. I'm a chess player. I play a lot of chess against computers. I used to play for a very strong club in England, and we had the British champion, the joint junior British champion, the 8 times Kent County. All these people on our team, 8 times Kent County champion.
Oh wow! Yeah.
The guy who wrote the chess for the British Chess magazine. Right up for that. We had all these powerful players, and we had boards, teams, 5 on the A team and 5 on the B team. And I was board 5 on the B team, so I was 10th strongest in the club.
Wow,
which is pretty good amongst that sort of competition, And I played 3-day tournaments. I love it, but playing against computers is very interesting.
Yes. So just a couple more questions here before we wrap up. Who would you say your book appeals to and why?
Probably the younger generation. By that, I mean probably 14, 15, up to 20s, probably more so than the older generation. Probably up to maybe 30, I don't know. I would say between 14 and 30 years old, probably. Although there are young-minded older people, so
yes,
you can't, be specific on that. So I think it'll appeal to both genders, male and female. I hope the females will like it because it's got a female champion in there,
Right. Yes, and it sounds like maybe even anybody who's interested in the AI piece of things or advancements in science would definitely be interested in your book, because you've done a lot of research to be able to write a story to include that. So it seems like people who are interested in that would like it too. Yeah,
I was a little bit annoyed because the film is also being offered to Hollywood for film. Whether they'll take it or not, I don't know. But my publishers presented it to them.
Okay.
So they're interested. One of the comments by the script writers who read the book was that they didn't think it was very probable. And that's really wrong, because it is entirely probable.
Is it right?
On science that is existing today.
Right.
And so they wanted to make it into a kind of alien artifact, using alien technology. I said, no need for that. We've got the technology now, We don't need.
And that's why, that's why it's always better to read the book than see the movie, right? Because the book is the real, tells the real story.
This is interesting because Isaac Asimov, the famous science writer.
No, I don't know.
Very, very famous. Isaac Asimov, one of the most famous science fiction writers in history. He wrote a thing called I, Robot.
Yes.
There's a film made of that.
Yes. I've seen the movie.
The film is entirely different to the book. The book is about a very conceited, egotistical robot that believes it's superior to humans. And it's sent up to a space station to work with these scientists. And the robot, it just drives them mad because it's going on about how humans could not have created a machine that's more intelligent than them,
Right.
And therefore the robot, robots must have created humans. And you get all this kind of thing going on. It's very, very humorous. But I, Robot is about a murdering robot. It's something entirely different. It's same title, totally different story.
Well, again, typically how it goes with books and movies.
Yeah, but they do that. I don't think Isaac Asimov would have been very pleased. He's dead now. Yeah.
Well, so as we wrap up today, my guest has been Janus Black, author of the book Enter the Huntress. And before we close out, Janus, what's one thing you'd like to leave the readers with today to make sure that they know about your book?
I want them to enjoy the book. I want it to give them pleasure. I want to find, to be exciting and interesting for them, and to remember it for that. But also, as I say, the ethical questions that it raises are very important. As science is going, and it will develop these things. I mean, we're halfway there now. You've got people who are half machine already. You've got. They're now looking at. They've actually created a guy who's got an implant in his head, and he can receive telephone calls and listen to the rate in his brain. Connects to the internet. His brain connects to the internet. And they're doing these cameras that will fit into the eye for blind people. Mm-hmm. That connects the optic nerve, and they can see. There's all this technology going on. Where's it going? And how advanced it's going to be. I think those are the sort of things I like the reader to pick up on.
Yeah, and anything's possible.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I think so. The world is such an incredible place.
Yeah. Yes.
And mathematics raises questions that we can't answer.
Yeah.
Infinity, and try and imagine what infinity is. The human brain can't grasp it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Janus, I want to thank you for joining us today and being our guest on Books on Air.
Okay, that's my pleasure.
You can find out more about the book, Enter the Huntress, on Amazon. I'll link to the book in the show notes, so be sure to check that out. You've been listening to the Books on Air podcast, brought to you on webtalkradio.net. You can also hear this podcast on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and Apple Podcasts. I'm Sloan Fremont, and I hope you'll join us for the next Books on Air podcast. Remember, you never know who's going to be here, and you never know what we're going to talk about. Thank you so much for listening.